Hello and welcome to the Gothic Unicorn and to another spooky season video. Now today I'm going to be using something out of season to make something, well, far spookier. Today's make is going to utilise a polystyrene egg. Now these are obviously generally sold at Easter, and I generally pick them up after Easter in the sale. They're quite useful because if you cover them with a water balloon, you can actually, and use some wire to make a string, you can make a reasonable sort of balloon for 1/6 scale. Although the balloons do eventually disintegrate and leave a mess. So I'm going to be using that, and the other main thing I'm going to be using is pipe cleaner, a chenille stick. Now, the last time I used one of these was to make my dragon eggs, but I'm going to actually transform one today. I'm going to turn this into a less than friendly plant. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do is to make a mouth. Now, this is one that I did ages ago and never finished. It's been sitting around on the outskirts of my desk for a long time, and all that I've done is I've cut out a slither. Now, I'm going to make the mouth on this one a bit wider, but I'll probably use this one as well, so I'll have a two-headed man-eating plant. Now what I've done is I've taken my craft knife and I decided where and how big I wanted the mouthpiece to be. So I'm just going to mark through like that. Now this is going to take a while. Styrofoam, yes, I remembered what they call it other than polystyrene. Is a bit of a pain to cut. So I'm going to do that off screen because it makes lots of horrible squeaky noises which are going to be really obnoxious to anybody that's trying to watch this. And I'll come back and show you my new head. Now I've cut out the mouth, and I must apologise because there are still some loose bits in here. The other one has been cut for so long that all the loose bits have actually gone, ended up elsewhere in my craft room. Now I have used a paper piercer to make a hole which I can then fit, which I can fit in due course my pipe cleaner, my chenille stick into, and that's going to form the stem of the tree. Now, plant even. I want to give this some protection, and obviously being the material that it is, it's not a nice smooth surface or anything like that. So I'm going to start off with some Mod Podge, and I'm going to put a nice coat of Mod Podge all over them, and that will hopefully give me a bit of a better surface when it comes to painting and to adding details, because I'm going to add details to them. I'm going to use air dry clay. You could use, well, you could use any kind of air drying clay. I wouldn't say you could use polymer clay because you can't really put these in the oven, and if you could make the pieces, take them off and bake them and then glue them on afterwards, then yes, you could use polymer clay. But I'm going to use DAS, which is a paper based air dry clay. I could use my silk clay, but I'm just going to use the DAS today because it dries nice and hard, and it takes paint really well. So on to some Mod Podge to protect these. When I started doing this man-eating plant, I actually had a plant in mind, And that's what I did when I cut this one all the time ago that I did this. And the plant that I'd seen actually had eyes. Now I was going to replicate that look. I was going to give it eyes and maybe a bit more in the way of lips using some clay, as I mentioned previously. Now it's actually been quite a while, a number of days since I started filming this. Something came up in real life and the mini stuff got put on hold. Anyway, I went back to look for the image and I can't find it. So I'm going to go for the more sort of traditional kind of Ordery 2 plant from Little Shop of Horrors, which is a plant that has a pod like this but doesn't have eyes, just a big mouth and lots of teeth. So I'm actually going to start putting some paint on this. I know I could work it out myself with putting eyes on and stuff, but I am also aware that I'm now quite behind on this, and I really want to get it done, so I'm going to paint it. Now the other thing I have realised is that I haven't got the right sort of green in my craft paint, but I have found a sap green acrylic paint in my rock painting paints, which are more towards the artist quality. These are the ones that I call my artist's acrylics. Like artist's acrylics, they're thicker than craft paints. So I've got that, and I have also got a deep red that I'm going to put inside the mouths. So I will start on that, I think. Put a bit of the red in there. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to paint inside the mouth. Now, after the issues I had while I was filming my last video, I have received so much support from so many of you lovely people, and I'd just like to thank you. You know, I've actually had a really difficult week this week, on top of somebody being so personal in their hatred. It's been difficult. It's been really difficult. But you know, having so many people say that they appreciate what I do has been really, really nice. And it has been such a boost this week. Now, as I said in my last video, I have issues that I don't bring to the videos because they're not really relevant to miniature making. They don't stop me making the miniatures, but they make making the videos incredibly difficult. Now I know that sounds a bit cryptic, but they are involved with speech, so attacks on my speech do upset me somewhat. They also upset me because I do what I do so that I can say to younger people who've got similar problems to what I've faced, it doesn't have to define you your entire life. You know, and that sort of thing isn't good. Especially not because this month is actually the awareness month for this particular condition. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I may put something up on Facebook, sort of to spread awareness. I don't know yet. Depends how I feel with everything else that's going on in my life. But we've now got one of my heads with a red mouth. Now to stand him up, I'm using some clothespins, I think the Americans call them. And I just use a couple of those and sort of prop him up. And it means that he can stand up to dry. It's a simple little trick, but it's one that I like using. They're also great to use as little clamps. So I've always got some on or around my desk. The heads of the plant, the pods, I'm not 100% sure what to call them. I've had their green coats. They've actually had 3 coats of green paint. The first one, I'm afraid they looked rather watermelon-ish, so they definitely needed more, but they've come out okay. Now they need some teeth. To make the teeth, I could use toothpicks, but I do not have that much of a use for toothpicks without points at the moment. So I decided to forego the toothpicks and go with some wire. Now, as you can see, this is silver wire. It's quite a strong wire, but it's still quite pliable. And all that I'm doing is I am painting it with some white acrylic paint, and I'm doing a pretty naff job of this, but I'm just painting it with some white acrylic paint, and then I'm going to set this aside to dry. And then once it's dry, I will cut it into pieces that are tooth length, a bit longer than I want the teeth, to be fair. Just use my wire cutters for that. Not covered very well, I don't think. I think my brush has gone a little bit hard. I'm not doing very well at the moment. And somebody is banging outside, so I do apologise if my microphone picks that up. Shouldn't do, but just touch up the bits that I just knocked. And then I'll leave that to dry and we'll see how it turns out. If I get one of these maybe, and ensure it's standing up off screen now. What I've actually done is I've done some and I have cut them, and they're in this little pot. So I'm going to get my tweezers, my much loved tweezers. I didn't used to see the point, but since I've started doing 1/48 scale, I love my tweezers. Now I'm going to put the end into some glue, and then I'm going to pick a spot and I'm going to push it in. And of course it's not going to work with the tweezers, is it? And so I'm actually going to push it in like that, and as you can see, at least I hope you can see, he's now got his first tooth. Now I'm going to carry this on and do all of the teeth on this one. The teeth on this second one are going to have to be smaller because I've got a smaller mouth. So I'm going to go off now and insert a load of teeth into a monster mouth. With the teeth in place, my heads of my plant are looking pretty good. Now, before I attach them to their stems, I'm going to make a planter for them. Now, in keeping with the other planters that I've made for Halloween this year, I'm going to be using some foam board, foam core, if that's what you prefer to call it. This is just a scrap, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a few pieces of this, stack it up, and then cover the outside with some air dry clay to give it a kind of stone effect. So that's my next step, and I'll come back and show you when it's done. This is my little planter. It's foam board in the middle, as I said. There's 3 pieces here glued together, stacked up, and then wrapped in the DAS air dry clay. I'm going to paint this next. I'm going to give it a base coat of a light grey and then dry brush over with some dark grey. I think that's the right way around to match my other planters. And then it's just a case of finishing this off. Now I'm probably going to finish the top of the planter off with some soil, tea, in other words, tea leaves, And then I've got to make room for the actual stems of the plant. But the plant is really simple. It's not anything complicated or special. It's actually fairly light, which is great, but there is actually enough weight for it to stand up and to support the plants, as long as they don't make the stems too long. So I need to bear that in mind. But the planter is painted up, just a rough paint job. This isn't a piece that's going to be sitting around all the time, but it'll go with the others. And I have put 2 holes into the foam board. All I've done is I've used my paper piercer. You could use a haul, I think that's what it's called, which is a tool that carpenters use for making holes. But this is a paper piercer. This is one that I've had for many years, and it keeps going. It's a great piece of kit. But I made the holes with that, and then I just widened it with that, so they're actually big enough to take a piece of pipe cleaner. So those will be glued in to take the little heads of my plant in due course. Now I'm going to cover the black bit, which I've actually painted because of course the air dry clay left some marks behind. So I just put a coat of black, and I'm going to cover that with some glue, just some ordinary PVA glue, white school glue. And I'm going to cover it with tea leaves. This will be my soil. I could use some moss, as I've used on some of my other planters, but I want this one to actually look like it's in soil, so I'm going to use the tea leaves. And when the PVA has dried, I will then put a thin coat of Mod Podge over the top, just to seal the tea leaves in place. And when I've done that, I'll come back to you, because then it will be time to finish these guys off. The Mod Podge is drying on my planter. It's starting to dry around the edges, but it takes a while. So it's time to get these guys onto their stems. So I'm going to begin by taking them off the cocktail stick and the bit of doweling that I've used. The cocktail stick was better because it did actually hold it in place. And now I've got my 2 plant heads. Now I've been using this piece sort of for sizing and for sizing of holes and things, and I could just put it on. Now what I do find is if you've got a bit of a bend in there, it actually looks a bit better, but that makes that one quite low. So I've put a bend in the end of this one, and when I find my wire cutters, which of course I haven't got ready, I'm going to cut this bit, and I'm going to put this little chap's head onto here. And as you can see, I compose him a bit. And when he goes into the pot, I compose him a bit more. So I get the end of my chenille stick, pipe cleaner, whatever you know these as. And I've got a blob of glue on there now. Got the glue just out of sight. And I'm going to put that well into his I put him the wrong way around. I'll just turn him around because the glue's still wet. I'm going to get a toothpick and just take off the worst of the extra blob of glue. I don't want it everywhere. It doesn't matter if there's a bit because it dries clear, but we want him to look sort of tidy. So there's the one. He can go aside to be dry. And then I've got another pipe cleaner here, which I'll put onto him. And again, I want to bend him a bit. Maybe have his head looking down a bit more so it looks like he's looking, and he's going to be taller than that one, I think, because I do want them slightly different heights. I'll start off with something like that, and again into the glue, good blob. Now the glue I've put on here, I have actually had on my little bit of card for a while because it goes tacky, and I put that in there. And again, I'm going to leave this to dry. Once the glue is dried, hopefully the Mod Podge will be dry, and then we can put the plant into there, and we can decide if I want to add any foliage. You know, I might want to put some leaves on there. I might not. I don't know yet. Yeah, a bit more drying time. Now with the plant to dry, all the Mod Podge on the top of the tea leaf soil dry, I actually let it dry overnight just to make sure it was properly done. It's time to start fitting the plants in, and one's already been done. Now I decided I wanted some leaves on my plant, so I've taken a piece of this, which is aquarium plant, nice plastic leaves, and I cut some bits off and I've stuck them onto the plant. Now to get the plant into the soil, I have put some glue, which I allowed to go tacky. This just means that with this glue of mine that I just leave it out for a while. I don't need a lot. Hopefully I've got enough there, because there wasn't much left on there. Just put it around the end of my cocktail stick. I can add some more in a minute if I want. And we push him in. And all I need to do is sort of position him kind of how I want him. That's something like, and then I will let that dry. Once the glue at the base is dried, I will then be able to reposition my plant a little bit, but I quite like how this is looking. I'll be able to twist the pipe cleaners obviously, but yeah, I'm liking how my plant is starting to look. As a bit of a finishing touch for my plant, I've made a sign that says "Do not feed." Although I've got to admit, I don't think that if these wanted to eat something, you'd be able to stop them. But what I've done is I've made a little sign out of some air dry clay, which I cut out into a vaguely circular shape. I also made a square post, and I'm going to stick it onto the front of the planter. That's the word. I'm going to stick it onto the front of the planter so that it will help weight down the planter a bit more, because I think this is a little bit top heavy, but it'll also mean that the piece will stay in the same place whatever happens. So I'm going to allow this to dry, and then we can take a look at it. And here we have my man-eating plant. I'm quite happy with how it's come out. It might not be exactly what I had in mind when I started, but I like it. I like that it's got a little bit of personality. I like that I can move the stems to a certain degree, and I think it's going to look great spooking up my doll's house for Halloween. If you've enjoyed this video, please like, comment and subscribe, and until next time, bye.